Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to our Sisters Virtual Tea. Just a little background. We are an informal group. If you are a woman who is looking for a welcoming space to help navigate being part of the Muslim community, please join us. Our goal is to have a safe space to build friendships, get your questions answered, and discuss the issues that are affecting us. In the past, we did interfaith book reading event at ICNM with the actual tea and oral health talk and several other religious halakas. Now, as we cope with the pandemic and the stress and the anxiety that it brings to our lives, we need to remember to take care of our spirits. In times when we cannot go to our masajids and Islamic centers, we can still connect via virtual world and share our thoughts and build relationships and friendships. So Jazakallah khair to all who are here. I welcome our host, Kianaat Karim, and our guests, Khadijah Chudnoff, Khadijah Adebayo, and Alisa Reza. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Kianaat. I'm your host. So this event is Interculturalism in our communities. And this is part 2. We had an event a few months back, and this event will be covering marriage, food, conflict, language, family, and community dynamics. So I will first get started with a quick explanation of what Sister Steve, which was what Sister Aamna gave, and then an explanation of the intercultural series. What that is essentially just going in and talking about things that we face interculturally in our communities, because our communities aren't just one culture, one set of people, whether it's from the same country, whether it's from the same region or whatnot. We are a very diverse set of people with a very diverse set of opinions and views and things of that nature. So that's what we are. And when we say intercultural, that's what we mean, not just different cultures in the traditional meaning, but also the different family dynamic, different community dynamic, or even which part of the United States you grew up on. So I just wanted to give you guys quickly a brief explanation of everything. And that's what that was. And then also let you know that next month, inshallah, we'll also try to host a Black History Month event, and we'll have info on that coming soon. So keep on the lookout from all of us sharing or in your community chats. And with that, we are going to do a short one minute introduction to each of our panelists. We'll start with Khadijah Chudnoff.
Assalamu alaikum. Everybody can hear me, I think, I hope. I live in New Mexico right now, and I guess I'm here because for about 4 years, I was a marriage coach, and I went on to planning intercultural events for marriage and stuff like that. So I believe that's why I'm here.
Okay, now Alisa, are you on?
Yeah, assalamu alaikum everybody. My name is Alisa. I was invited to speak today as, alhamdulillah, I work in helping Muslims find marriage and get them matched. Also, I am in an intercultural marriage. My background is Mexican American and my husband is Moroccan. And yeah, I guess that's a bit about me.
Khadijah Adebayo.
Hi everybody, my name is Khadijah Adebayo. Please let me know if you're not able to hear me in the chat group. It's so nice to meet you all. I reside in Georgia, and in terms of culturalism and interculturalism, when I was working on my master's degree, I did do a research assistantship where I worked with teaching cultural competency to different undergraduate students. And then a little bit of background about myself. I am a revert to Islam, and then also my mother is white, my father's Black, and then my husband is Nigerian. And I'm American. Yeah, so it's nice to meet you all.
So I just wanted to let everyone know that I chose these 3 people because I found that they were either active people interculturally or within our community or helping people, or they were phenomenal leaders in our community. So that's why we selected them. today, and we'll get started with the panel right away from that. So my first question is a marriage question. Not all these will be marriage questions, but we'll start here. For spouses marrying interculturally, can there be a language issue when visiting in-laws? So I bring this up because this is a common thing that people will bring up, or a stereotype of intercultural marriages. So either our parents or someone in the community will bring this up, and that will be a few of these things that are going on further throughout all the questions. So we'll start with Khadijah Chudnoff with this question.
So it's important to first remember in your question when you mentioned, can there be language barriers or language misunderstandings, that language covers so much more than what is verbally spoken. Language language is about facial expressions, your body language, and all of those are so embedded in our cultures as Americans, as Nigerians, as Syrians, as whatever, that, yeah, absolutely, there can be huge misunderstandings. And so my advice for that is, when you first get married, things tend to be in extremes. There's extreme love, and there's also extreme fighting, and there's extreme confusion, and there's everything is so extreme because everything is so new, and we're all just working it out, and we're all just doing the best we can. But it tends to have this roller coaster effect of very, very high highs and very, very low lows. So the first step is to remember that that's normal, and to kind of go with the motions, and to start listening more than you're speaking, and to start learning, was my face like that? Were my arms crossed when my mother-in-law was telling me that she doesn't cook her curry like this? And, how did I look? And all we can do is kind of, internalize, focus on ourselves, and hope that our good intentions and our good actions reflect that, and other people's behaviors then start reflecting that. So start off with the best of intentions, and also remember that those high highs and low lows, they kind of tend to start being less of a roller coaster. So step one is listen more than you're speaking, and get a feeling of what the other people are trying to show you. Number two is, sometimes in so many aspects of our marriage, is you have to just go with the flow. You're gonna have to get in a fight. You're gonna have to work it out with your sister-in-law. You're gonna have to figure out the different ways they celebrate Eid and da-da-da-da-da. It's just gonna happen. And if every single time it happens, it feels like it's the end of the world, we need to reprioritize, and we need to realize, why are we making this such a big deal? Let's take it down a notch. Let's slow it down, and let's work through these one at a time. And the third thing, and this is, I believe, the most important, is if an argument gets so bad and you have a rift with a sister-in-law, a mother-in-law, a brother-in-law, it is always so important to remain encouraging to your spouse that they keep good relations with their parents, with their siblings, because the Prophet ﷺ said a Muslim does not break ties with their family, even if that person breaks ties with them. So I believe it's, part of our duty to always be encouraging our spouse to be the best they can, and them for them to encourage us to be the best we can. So even if you're having issues with the in-laws, keep it there, stop it there, and continue to encourage your spouse to have good relations with them.
That was an excellent response. Alisa, would you like to follow?
Yeah, I like exactly what Khadijah had to say. And it is a good reminder that, marriage, especially in the beginning, is tough, and everything's new, and as exciting as it can be, and fresh and, romantic, you have those lows too, where you're getting to know somebody. There's miscommunication. And when it comes to in-laws, my suggestion would be to really take the time to get to know them and their family. One thing that I found a bit interesting in the beginning, my family, I come from a Hispanic background, and we all are very close, and that's what I loved about my husband's family. They are all very family oriented. Everyone has good connection, and part of my husband's family, they're very passionate when they speak, and so they speak a bit, louder, and just it took a while for me to kind of understand, like, is he angry? Is your dad angry? And my husband's like, no, that's just how he talks. He's just a passionate guy. So the more you get to be with them, and I would say with Khadijah, if you could take a step back and mostly observe, that helps you to understand where everyone is coming from and be able to learn them better. And then also just to find, those common denominators. That's one thing that can really help in building that relation. My mother-in-law, she didn't speak English or Spanish, just Arabic. And myself, I didn't know as much Arabic in the beginning. So we found similarity through cooking. And so I would try to spend time with her in that way. And, we would learn from one another and learn the language Arabic together. And it was really nice.
I think what both of you guys said is gaining that familiarity and having that adjustment period. That's one of the most important things to whether it's a language issue or otherwise. Khadijah, Adebayo, can you continue on that?
Yes. So if you guys hear a baby in the background, my apologies. I'm a new mom. So I would like to just add to that, of course, when answering the question, can there be a language issue or barrier when visiting in-laws or just being around them? Yes, there can be a language issue and barrier. When the other two sisters were speaking about hand gestures or interpreting words different can be a language issue as well. Like in Nigeria, well, let me say, like, here in America, if you say, like, are you mad? Some people will be like, are you upset? Are you angry? But if I tell my mother-in-law, are you mad? It's going to be like, are you mentally insane? So that's what that's going to transfer to. And that can create a problem or an issue if I'm not aware or she's not aware that there's, different meanings or interpretations to phrases. And then also with hand gestures, I'll never forget, there was this one time I kept seeing my husband and some of his friends keep doing their fingers when they're mad at somebody. I'm like, what's that mean? So I just did it to my husband one time to, joke around, and he was like, that means that you insulted my father. And I'm like, oh, you cursed my father? I was like, oh, my dad. And I think that there can be language and communication barriers, but not only with in-laws from different countries or cultures or different backgrounds, but also, dealing with your in-laws, if you have a spouse who's born and raised in the deep South versus somebody who was born and raised up north or from a different state, culturally, those can be issues and divides as well. Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, that's very important because oftentimes when English is a second language in our community, we're also balancing the fact that they take a lot of things literally, or maybe another way how it is in their language. So that's a really great note that probably isn't even thought about when you're talking about the language barrier. So with that, we'll go to the second question. Does it cause any problems when different foods of different cultures are cooked in the same house or in the same community? And by that, I mean possibly something like Mexican food and then Desi food, or let's say Nigerian food with Arab food. And we'll start with Khadijah Chudnoff.
So again, these are things that, a husband and wife can kind of work out together, who likes what are you going to cook when this person comes over? These are, the small issues that we should say, alhamdulillah, that these might be your issues in a marriage and not something so much bigger. It can feel horrible if people don't like the way you cook something, but in the grand scheme of things, it's very small. I believe in the masjid, there are times that it has become problems, that it becomes kind of a status thing. We have seen it, unfortunately, play out before. And for example, maybe one night they're cooking American style food for iftar and not a lot of people are interested in it, or so they don't come to iftar that night. So it's important for us to remember that Islam is an all-encompassing religion. And with that, we are taught the adab, the manners of everything in our life, that if you are invited to something, you should come to it. So you don't just go to iftar when the big families at the masjid are coming. You know, you don't just go, you don't just accept those invitations. If you get invited by somebody from a different culture, from a different race, from a different whatever, you still should respect that invitation. You still should show up to it. And luckily, the Prophet ﷺ gave us tools how to deal with every single situation. If there's a food that you don't like, you don't, you know, this is like what I'm constantly teaching my kids, like, don't make these horrible faces when you put someone's food in your mouth, you know, control yourself. And so if, you know, just take a step back. It's not about you. This person made this food. And if we're respectful, we're going to be rewarded for it. Just scoot the food over, don't eat it, move along, you know, and that's it. It can be very simple.
And that's what the Prophet says to do. Just leave the food on your plate if you don't like it. And then people should generally get the idea without it being a huge issue. Alisa.
Yeah, so in the beginning stages of getting married, you know, first of all, I wasn't that great of a cook. So my husband had a lot of patience. But yes, you know, of course, you're going to have those conversations as to what you like, what he likes, what's good for the family. You know, things change also when you have kids, in wanting to cook for your family. You know, what's a healthy meal for them as well. I love spice. My husband's not so great with spice. So, you know, I'll have my chili right there on the side, you know, just pour a little on top. Normally that's best in satisfying my needs. And so I guess as far as with foods, other than that, it hasn't been too big of a problem. My husband also really loves food, so he's open to trying new things all the time. So that's really nice. I remember my first Ramadan, I volunteered, me and a friend of mine, Chantel, to cook for the masjid for an iftar. And we did a Mexican type theme. It was shredded chicken, soft tacos, but we added like tomato and red and yellow peppers. And we just got a lot of compliments that night from the community and how much they really liked the food and they enjoyed having something different. So that was a really, it made me feel really happy that I was able to please a lot of people and that it was enough for everybody too. So that's sort of my experiences.
Yeah, so I definitely think that there can be problems or issues of different foods being cooked in the same house if you're from different cultures or different backgrounds, if one or the other is not open. So I always like to use myself as an example. If I hated Nigerian food and never wanted to try it or never wanted to eat it or be around it, or if my husband couldn't stand American food or Southern food, then yes, there will create a divide and issues. But if we're open to one another and it's like, okay, one night we're gonna have Nigerian food, another night we might have some food that I was raised up in and grew up with. And so for us, a lot of times we eat separate meals for dinner or lunch, and we're completely fine with that. We're okay with that. I remember we had one guest come over and they were really shocked. They're like, aren't y'all eating the same food? And you have to do this and that. And we're like, I mean, we're completely fine with it. We don't have any problems, you know, maybe 1 or 2 days out the week, we might have the same foods and that's okay too. And it was really interesting when you guys brought up the masjid. In terms of the masjid, I remember there was this one particular mosque that I attended and they were having an event and they wanted to cater soul food. And so at first, you know, some of the community members were a little skeptical because they're like, nobody's going to eat this. Like, you know, they're not going to have it. Why, you know, go through all the hassle of making or catering it to everybody? And then it turns out they were mad, not that they were mad because this happened, but it turns out that at the event, people were taking extra food home that they shouldn't be taking home. And so they were mad because they're like, everybody's taking the food and they eating everything. So it went from nobody's going to eat it to, oh my gosh, we're almost out of food. So that just made me think of that. So I think if you just try something new, it could work, but it can definitely cause problems in the household if you're reluctant, or if you're picky with certain foods, or if you just don't want to, like I said, try if you like it, if not, or see if there's a dish that both of you like that's from different cultures. Yeah.
I definitely don't want to like minimize anyone's feeling of like how big these problems can feel. And I would be interested with Khadijah and Alisa, like, did you, I'm talking like 13 years later, right? I've been married 13 years. And I'm like calm, cool, and collected about it now. But I remember my husband telling me like, oh, you should learn how to cook this dish from my sister. And I was like, oh my God, what are you saying? Like, you don't love me. So I definitely remember it feeling a lot bigger then. And now, like Khadijah's saying, like, we can eat separate meals, whatever, it's cool. Like, but I definitely don't feel like I would have been cool with that like day one, So everything changes. Everything takes time.
I can completely understand what all three of you mentioned, because I know since I'm a half Pakistani, I primarily cook Pakistani food. That's how I grew up. Sometimes too much spice can be a thing for my husband. So after the fourth day of me cooking Pakistani food, it can become a problem. So sometimes it's not even that it's a different food, it's that there's an actual physical problem. So that's really, I love what you guys said about this. So question 3, this is another marriage question. How does one deal with in-law conflict in terms of communication? And what are the tools and methods to help bridge these misunderstandings when they do happen? Khadijah, Chudnoff.
So I think I touched a little bit on this in the beginning, but I would say again that we should believe that people have the best intentions. And a lot of times what happens is we get kind of caught up in what our intentions were. And since our intentions were so right, but there was some kind of miscommunication, then we jump to the conclusion then maybe that person's intentions weren't good. And the problem is with that other person. And a lot of times with different cultures, nobody's at fault. It turns out that it was sincerely a misunderstanding or a difference of opinion, which is also fine. Or, those some, I think the older I get, the more I realize that an argument doesn't necessarily mean that one party is wrong. It could mean that both parties are right, but we just have totally different worldviews. I would say, in terms that we were all talking about kind of taking time to to know our in-laws, I would say it is hard because we jump into it a lot of times, especially as women. We tend to like jump into things 100%, and we're like, my sisters are going to be my best friends, and my mother-in-law is going to be like my new mom, and I'm going to love her, and I'm going to be the best daughter-in-law, and everything is because we have the best of intentions and all of this stuff. And then when one little thing happens, we tend to crumble, so it is important to take your time to understand your in-laws, and probably start off, I would recommend honestly starting off a little formally. If you are marrying someone from a different culture, I would ask that person, what kind of things can I do to show respect to your mother or to your father? Or, for example, my husband is Syrian, and he always kisses his parents' hand and then touches his forehead. And he does it to my parents. And so my parents were a little uncomfortable as converts to let my husband kiss their hands, but now that's like my dad's favorite thing. He like walks in the door and he's like, hey, Hassan, come here. Like, and I had to get out of my bubble and show respect to my father-in-law and learn how to do that. So there are the communication between, your husband or your wife is there to kind of bridge that gap. And it is kind of their responsibility to help you understand those little things that you can do to show respect to them. Because once there's respect, inshallah, if there's respect, then they can kind of blow off mistakes, or, like, we know Khadijah's a respectful girl, so this was probably a misunderstanding, or we know this, so it's important to establish a good foundation of respect.
And that really brings into play the intercultural topic of family dynamic being part of that, and a huge part of that. So Alisa.
So I also took some time to learn about, and asking my husband and how they show respect to the family. And I know one thing was, when I'm going to speak to my father-in-law, I say Amu Homed, or my mother-in-law likes to be called Leila. So it's just showing sort of their position, right? And I guess kind of hierarchy, that respect also. If I can recall a time where there was sort of, I can't remember the exact issue, but if something would arise where I wasn't comfortable with a certain thing, I would speak with my husband about it first. I would like him to know, am I overreacting? Am I overthinking? A lot of the times, I don't know why, I'm just kind of a paranoid person maybe. So I would hear them speaking and I think they're speaking about me. I'm like, are you guys talking about me? Because I don't know the language. So I'm trying to learn. And he's like, no, we weren't even. And I was like, oh, I thought I heard. And he's like, no. So I think first speak to your husband about it. And, if it was something that you're serious about and that you were uncomfortable with, he can figure out a way to help, get the both of you to speak. And alhamdulillah, I have very open in-laws, and also sister and brothers-in-law. So it hadn't been a big problem for me, but I guess my main consejo, my main advice would be to speak to your spouse about it first.
Yeah, I think making a game plan in the times when you're either struggling to resolve that conflict or there is no answer to it is one of the most important things. So at least make sure you and your spouse or you and whoever the community member is are on the same page. Khadijah, Adebayo.
Hi. So again, you might hear a screaming baby in the background. New mom, okay? Very fussy. But anyways, I agree with what the lady said. Just being respectful, trying not to get frustrated. Again, that's way easier said than done. You don't want to cuss your mom or your father-in-law out or your sister-in-law out. Sometimes I watch these TV shows or see my other friends and they're like, ah, beep, beep, beep. Don't do that. Like, breathe. But also, I really like what Alisa said, talking to your spouse about it, because sometimes there might be instances where certain in-laws might say something that might come off as offensive to you because of that communication barrier, and they might actually mean it another way, so that can be, a tool as well. And just like both of the ladies were saying, Khadijah and Alisa, listening and learning. So listening can be, let's say my mother-in-law says something that, or I say, well, let's say it from my perspective as a woman. So let's say my mother-in-law says something to me that I don't like, or I do something that she doesn't like. And I go up to her and I say, hey, I noticed I did something that made you upset. Can you explain to me why? Again, this is easier said than done. And that listening part comes in to where she's explaining it to me. Because again, if we're from different cultural backgrounds, that we're understanding that communication. But it definitely has to be a two-way street. It definitely has to be you and the in-laws both trying to listen and learn together. And I think that combination really can decrease the conflict. Again, like I stated, it's easier said than done. Lots of dua and lots of patience. Yeah.
Okay, and with that awesome set of answers, we'll move to the next question. It's labeled number 6, but number 4. This is another marriage question. What boundaries might be needed in an intercultural marital dynamic, whether it be between spouses or in-laws, or if you don't have that kind of experience in your community, what is the dynamic that you've seen, things like that? And Khadijah Chudnoff, you could start us off.
Yeah, so I think again, this is one of those things that we tend to start off completely open, right? That we don't have boundaries and come in and do this and do that. But, and then slowly as a unit, you and your husband can start making natural boundaries. And the key is a natural boundary. But when we wait until there's a huge conflict and then say, well, your brother's no longer allowed at my house, then those boundaries are not natural. It's not fair to your husband to ban a family member to your house unless something extreme happened, right? So if we slowly and naturally create dynamic, you know how we all have that friend that we slowly wedged out of our life? There's things like that in a marriage, you know, like every time, let's say an example, every time, back to the food, every time your in-laws came over, they didn't like my food. Therefore, well, let's start inviting them over for game nights instead. You know, there's always creative ways to switch up kind of what's happening. We also have to remember that we get caught up in what they're saying or their culture versus our culture, but there's some things that we're doing that look just as weird to them, you know, or weirder to them that we're doing. I remember I was, my one of my kids was sick and they had like a mild fever and I was like, I'm like a granola hippie. I'm like, I'm just going to let them sweat it out. They'll be fine, you know, whatever. And like, that was really hard for my in-laws to like kind of let my kid have a fever. And that's like a big thing for them to be okay with, where, you know, so those kind of things come up and we're doing weird stuff too. It's not just, oh, we're like these perfect people putting up with this weird culture. No, we're just as weird. We have to remember that.
Alisa?
Yeah, so I agree a lot with what Khadijah said. You know, think of creative ways. And in the beginning, it's a lot harder to set up boundaries in the beginning, right? You got to sit back first, kind of observe the different culture. What are things that are weird and different? And it's being able to communicate your feelings as well. I'm trying to think of examples. I know one thing, you know, in having a baby, right? You have a lot, not only my parents, but you have your mother-in-law or family giving you advice. You need to do this, you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to do this. And you as a mother just are wanting to, you know, stand your ground and do what you feel is right for your baby. So I'm always willing and open to listen to advice and hear what the other person thinks. I guess in the end, I end up kind of doing what I feel is best. When it comes to setting boundaries, I feel again, you know, speaking to your spouse about it, it is easier once you know, I lived with my in-laws and my in-laws and his brother and sister for some time, so that there was a lot of what was the word, times that were a bit uncomfortable in sharing a household with, you know, with so many people in the beginning, but it was something that we needed. And I liked that it allowed me to really get to know his family for the better. And, you know, when we had enough money and we're able to move out, it was nice finally having our own space. But alhamdulillah, I think it's just being patient, really.
And that set of boundaries changes with whatever dynamic you're in, whether that's living with in-laws, living next to them, far away, or talking on the phone in some people's cases. Khadijah, Adebayo?
Hi, so you might see me looking to the side, referring to my notes. So in terms of the question, what boundaries might be needed in terms of intercultural marital dynamic, I really think it depends, you know, again, on the culture, on the couple as well, what type of boundaries that they feel might be, you know, a barrier or an issue with them. So it could be small things, like an example is, you know, when my husband gets home from work or when he's at home, I like to follow him around everywhere. And he's like, hey, I like my space, you know? So that can be an issue, something just small and silly like that. It can also be, you know, stuff as in maybe you're somebody who likes to share your business to everybody about your marriage. And maybe your spouse, you know, likes their boundaries of, hey, I prefer to keep our business private, you know, don't tell everybody. That can be another thing that could be set up for discussion as well. In terms of in-laws, you know, certain boundaries could be like, maybe don't call me every day or every single day. Or it could be sometimes some people like to pop up unexpectedly or unannounced to the house. But also it's also important to realize maybe we don't realize that our in-laws might have boundaries as well, and to figure out and understand what that is. So maybe you might have an in-law that's, maybe you're the one who likes to call every day or come to their house, or like maybe to your mother-in-law, you're like, oh, and again, I'm speaking as a woman, I don't really know like guys' point of view, but maybe you're like to your mother-in-law, oh, I want to hang out all the time. We're gonna go to the mall and do this and that. And maybe your mother-in-law is like, no, I'm okay. I'm cool with that. We're not gonna do that. So also there could be, you know, boundaries with them as well. Because sometimes when I you know, hear these discussions, or when I speak about it myself, it's always the point of where they're doing this to me, and sometimes it's like maybe I'm doing something to them too. Yeah.
Sorry, Kai, I'm going to jump in really quick. What's so cool about Islam is that we have very limited that is haram or forbidden, right? We know that we get married, that's the relationship we're allowed to have. And inside that relationship, though, Allah, who is our creator, who knows how he created us, said, now you guys work it out how best for you. So there is not like a haram way to figure out this fight, or a haram or halal way to figure out this. You know, there's very limited of that actually when you break it down all the way down when you're going through those. So it's important to remember that there is a way for every single couple to figure out how to have healthy boundaries, healthy dynamics between everyone in their life. And it's our job to figure it out. There's no magic formula, unfortunately.
Yeah, and a lot of that comes off what we said in previous questions. It's just learning your family and watching their habits and the dynamic, and then trying to just go and get into that yourself the way that's comfortable for you and them, and that you notice is responded to well, inshallah. We have, I think this is these questions are all mixed up. I'm so sorry. Okay, I don't know what happened to my screen. Just this is question 5. What is your understanding of a multicultural or multi-generational masjid? Because remember, multi-generational is part of that intercultural thing where there's different cultures, from people 30 years older than us or 50 years older than us, than maybe even the 15-year-old that we're also working with in the masjid. And we'll start with Khadijah, Chudnoff.
So I'm going to have you come back to me because I'm not 100% sure. Okay. I have a good answer for this.
Okay, Alisa.
Yeah, I'm gonna pass. Let's let Khadijah, other Khadijah go.
So I guess my understanding of a multicultural, I will say multicultural and multi-generational masjid is a community with different, of course, races, ethnicity, backgrounds. You know, it's a board of, you know, not just a monolith of people, but a board of people who are from different men and women, brothers and sisters, a board of people from different ethnic backgrounds, people from different racial backgrounds, and then young people as well too. And then I also see, yeah, that's what I think of when I think of the different masjid, just with a little mix of everybody. You know, that's what I see. And I especially just pinpoint towards the board because I'm all about a very diverse board. Yep.
Either one of you have any response to this, or would you like to have it?
I actually have, if I can add something. Assalamu alaikum, everyone.
Hafida, sister, we will have the question answer in the end, please.
It's not a question. I was gonna try to answer this question.
Okay.
I don't know. I came kind of like late, but I don't know what the rules are.
Oh,
Okay,
so
go ahead.
how it works is we have the panelists go. Then for this particular topic, note in the chat either a question or that you have a response for that, and then we'll come to you at the end, just so we can get the whole presentation, and then everyone can have their discussion at the end.
Sure.
Yeah, so yeah, absolutely, Khadijah, thank you for saving us there. I would definitely say that having a board with different worldviews is extremely important. And, you know, we definitely see masjids often having growing pains. We as a country are having major growing pains right now. And you know, a lot of masjids are in this awkward teenage years of we don't relate to our parents anymore, and we don't relate to the kids anymore. And there's like this whole generation of Muslims who are like, we're a little bit woke, we're not very, very woke, you know, we don't, where everyone's just kind of trying to find where they go. But absolutely having a diverse group of people in charge is a must. It should be a requirement. It should absolutely be a requirement. Thank you for bringing that up, Khadijah.
And I guess that could also go to making sure the masjid has resources that tends to each different person, you know, kids, teenagers, adults, the elderly, people with disabilities, different translations of the Quran, a lot of different aspects. So it would be nice to, and I feel that would help, right? That with all those different resources, it would also help in bringing people from all backgrounds to the masjid.
And I also think one thing nobody really mentioned is what is your understanding of this as an individual? We should remember also that we're going to get offended by people, and that things are going to change in a masjid. Every year, every few years, things change. Good boards come in, inactive boards come in, and things of this nature. And we need to keep our ties, just like with people. We need to keep our ties with the masjid, because again, it's the worshiping to Allah and the befriending people for Allah that we want to stay together and be unified, and at least have a community even when things are going wrong, whether it's because of cultural issues, generational issues. People are active, they're not doing the things you want, things aren't offered the way they should be, things like that. And so this is our last question, number 6. It says, in a multicultural masjid, are there any differing expectations for youth? What could we do better to bring youth closer to the masjid? And we'll start with Khadijah. Chudnoff.
Yeah, you know, I'm kind of like in a interesting spot where I used to go to the masjid. When I first started going to the masjid, kind of, I'm going to tie in the last slide with this slide. There was a lot of things that I was very sensitive to, right? Like someone correcting me to wear socks when I prayed, or hold my hand a certain way. And I was the person who was very easily offended by everything. And then as I got older and had kids and got a little judgy, I became the person who was like, hey girl, maybe you want to put some socks on. And I had to learn from that experience. And I had to take a step back and be like, hey, remember you didn't like this? Why are you doing this? You know, and now I'm at the point in my life where I really want to reflect on the way the Prophet ﷺ gave dawah or interacted, because his masjid was multicultural, multi-generational, multi-class, right? Like we don't want to forget that either. And our masjids are too. And even when we see masjids that are like semi-segregated, there's a whole lot of undercurrents going on in those masjids that we might not just see visiting or see going on. So you first work on yourself. Second of all, you know, you work on doing simple things, saying Assalamu alaikum to every single person you see in the masjid, accepting invitations to, and inviting people you might not normally invite, you know, and start building a community that will resonate inside the masjid and outside the masjid. And we have to decide what we want from our masjids. There are masjids right now that are turning into cultural centers, half cultural centers, half masjids. Is that something that works for us? Is that something that's going to get the youth just in the door? Because guys, that's where we're at right now. We're like, forget having your kids pray tarawih. We're like, do you know who God is? Like, come on and get your foot in the door. So let's be realistic. Let's see what we need. And if we are not accepting of multiculturals, if we are not accepting of people of, you know, different backgrounds, different classes, different whatever, we're the losers for pushing people out, and we're going to have to answer to that. And they're the losers for not overcoming that and coming anyways. So like Kaya said, continue to come to the masjid. We're all doing the best we can, but we all can do a lot better.
And that's a huge chunk of the youth's issues. We don't realize with our multicultural things and our dynamics between families and cultures, the youth already have their own set of issues they're going through, on top of dealing with the masjid and struggling and not knowing who Allah is. So this was, oh yeah, we have Alisa and Khadijah Adebayo. So Alisa, if you could go next.
I just wanted to take this time and thank Khadijah, because when I was a new revert, you know, she was one of the people who reached out and extended her hand in wanting to get to know me. She threw me a little hijab party that I decided to wear hijab, and it really meant the world to me. And I do think if we all personally, you know, extend that offer just as community, you know, Muslims, and I feel that is such a huge way to speak and, you know, make people feel comfortable when going to the masjid, because it can feel quite intimidating for reverts, as they don't know what they're stepping into. And then I guess, you know, I feel we also as parents, you know, need to take that responsibility in connecting our youth to the masjid. You know, bring them to Tarawih, bring them on Fridays or to prayer. Let them have that love, find that love for the masjid. And I think that will help them in wanting to continually come to the masjid and be with their brothers and sisters.
Khadijah Adebayo.
Hi, so a little bit of background about myself is I reverted to Islam when I was 16. And before that, my mom would make me go to Sunday school and all that. And then I started to really love Islam. And so when I was a teenager, I wanted to create youth groups and stuff. And it was a little bit different at the particular masjid that I went to, because there wasn't really a lot of programs set up back then. But anyways, from what people were telling me, you know, when I was in the different Muslim student associations in college, and then from what I see from the youth now that are younger, that are 17 and 18, 19, a little bit older, I say you're still young. It's like maybe like 50. Just kidding, everybody's young. But anyways, I also attended one of these programs, and it was interesting. They were saying, and then I also can agree with it as well, but a lot of young people, when they come to the masjid, they feel like they have to put on a different face, or they have to be different, and they can't be themselves because they're going to be judged constantly. They feel like I have to be one way at the masjid and then another way with my other friends, you know, who may not be Muslim, or who may be Muslim too, but are not those people who are at the masjid, you know, or they just constantly feel like, again, just being judged for not being themselves. And stuff. And then I also feel like ways to do better to bring youth close to the masjid is, number one, having an imam and a board who's very, excited or wanting to do programs to help the youth. At a particular mosque that I attend, the imam immediately was like, when we got a new imam, he was like, we're having a youth meeting right now, and we're going to try to address not all the concerns, but I want to know what you guys like to do. So if that means having a hike, if that means, of course, can't do it in the pandemic now, but if that means going to going to get frozen yogurt, if that means, I think some of the youth there, they wanted to do a life skill session where, just learning how to change a tire, both for men and women. And then also, I remember they wanted to build a little youth center in the basement in one of their areas, and they made sure, the women and the brothers and the sisters are going to get equal time. And aside from that, I remember one time going to this halakha, and I also think, investing in a good youth leader, like a youth group leader too. I remember one time I went to this halakha at this masjid, and the youth group leader was like, there was this, what was she like, 12, 13, just like struggling to put her scarf on, her hair was out, and he stopped in the middle of the halakha. I mean, it was kind of awkward, but I thought it was cool. And he was like, I don't want you to feel like you have to put that on right now. We're not praying salah. I understand some people's going to have different opinions on that, wearing hijab in front of the masjid, but he just made her feel comfortable. He wasn't necessarily like, oh, haram, please, if you want to use that term. But anyways, and I think that if masjids don't want to invest time in bringing youth closer to the mosque, then what's going to happen 10, 15 years down the line is the masjids are going to be empty, or they're just going to be closed down, because you want the next generation to kind of take over. Yeah.
So I have something to say about this too, because I'm heavily involved with youth and I have been for 8 years now. I think the important thing that Khadijah said was the investment to our youth. To me, but obviously I have a bias, the most important thing in a masjid, after the duties of what a masjid is supposed to be, is in our youth, because they're the people that are going to take in the masjid when they get older. They're the people that are going to keep our Islam. They're the people that really are the most delicate out of everyone in our community. We should be delicate with every one of our Muslim brothers and sisters, but they have so many issues going on, and some of them take on their parents' issues and the masjid issues in a different form that we don't really understand as we get older. So I think it's really important. The thing that we could do to bring the youth to the masjid is really investing and prioritizing the youth over as much as possible, because I think this will bring the best to the masjid and life to the masjid and happiness to parents when their youth is actually thriving, when their kids are thriving, and when they're bringing good to the masjid, to their homes, and to their school, and to people around them in their community. So that's my take on that, just because I'm so passionate about the youth. And that ends really all the questions that we had today, and we're going to go into the questions that a lot of the viewers currently had. I'm going to let Aamna take over how we're going to do this real quick, because I know there's also someone that wants to respond to one of the questions as well. So she can review the rules and how we're going to do that really quick.
Sure, Jazakallah khair, Kianaat. Wonderful discussion. I really, really am enjoying it. I can sit down and listen to it a lot for several hours, but in the interest of time and of course respecting everybody's time, we really need to conclude. But we still have a few minutes, so let's take some questions. We have a question about when we were discussing about intercultural food in intercultural marriages. So the question is, what if your food is your love language? And I would request our panelists to answer in a sentence only, so we can take more questions, please. What is your food? What if your food is your love language? Khatijah, Chudnoff.
And then keep cooking, girl. That's it. Force them to like your food.
Excellent. What do you say, Alisa?
Oh, she checked out.
Okay. Khadijah, Adebayo.
I love food. So sometimes my husband will come home and surprise me with some lemon pepper wings, some hot wings. Yeah. One time, let me not get into that. But anyways, Yeah. Or if, let's say, his love language is food, I'm gonna pick one dish I can cook and I'll make that.
And I guess in all the cultures, the way to men's heart is through their stomach. So food is always good. Okay, there's another question. A lot of my clients, especially reverts, have asked me how to deal with the lack of reciprocation in respect for both sets of in-laws. What is the good way to advise them? Khatijah, Chudnoff.
You know, it's fine if I think we answered it a little bit in the beginning. It's fine if you're having a struggle with your in-laws, but continue to encourage your spouse to have good relationships with them, and your spouse continue to encourage you to have a good relationship, and then slowly, unless it gets bad enough that you have to seek help. And seeking help is good, you guys. Seeking help is what we should be doing. You know, that Allah told us, seek, if you don't know the answer, go seek someone who knows the answer. So if you don't have the answer, then go seek help outside of that if it gets to the point where you can't work it out.
Right. Alisa, you want to add a sentence?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question, so.
The question is if you're getting into issue with the in-laws, how to deal with that. I kind of summarized it.
Sure. So I like to always find that common denominator. I'm sort of a passive aggressive person. I don't like conflict. So if I can speak with my husband about it first, because I'm more comfortable in speaking with him, and then also try to build the relationship with my mother-in-law, let her to understand me and where I'm coming from in a way, like, again, we both like to cook. Let's go to the kitchen, show me a meal, show me one of, my husband's favorite meals I can learn, or what is something I can teach the kids, or just something new. Find that common ground to build on.
Thank you very much. Khadijah Adebayo, in the interest of time, I'm requesting one sentence answer, please.
Okay, so Khadijah and Alisa kind of summed it up for me. I don't really have anything additional, just, yeah, they.
That's right. Okay. How do you all's different cultural backgrounds affect the way you have raised or raising your children? Khadijah, Chudnoff, in one sentence.
Oh, girl, that's more than one sentence, so I don't know.
Try it.
Be respectful. That's it. Be respectful. If there's something, my husband and I have different madhabs, and I follow the madhab where I don't believe it's okay to shave the daughter's hair when she's born. And that was a conversation we had to have, but it was a conversation we had, and alhamdulillah, I won. So know your facts, bring your facts to the table, then you're good.
All right. Alisa, can you say in one sentence, what do you want to add?
For me and my husband, I think it's just bringing our two worlds together. So, keep your kids as much involved with both families. Unfortunately, my in-laws are away, but FaceTime, do everything you can to include both of your cultures and Islam, most importantly.
Right. Khatijah Adebayo.
I will talk really fast. Okay, so basically mine doesn't have to do with necessarily raising, but just what I've learned now is I know in Yoruba culture, okay, so in American culture, you have first, middle, last name, but in Yoruba culture, they have the naming ceremony, everybody brings in their names they want to call them. So sometimes my mother-in-law will say, oh, how's, so-and-so, the name that she picked out. So she'll have like a million names from different family members. And then also, sometimes I'm trying to go fast, but they might have, in American, the way I was raised, some people might have nicknames, and my husband wants to make it very apparent. And I agree with him as well, as people are going to call, my child by the name, her full name. They're not going to give it a nickname, or we're going to raise. He wants to make it very apparent that we're not going to try to have people, even if they're uncomfortable with saying her name, they're going to say her name.
Right. We actually have so many questions, and as Kianaat said, probably we'll have another full session to answer questions. There's so many. One question is, what can you say to the convert sisters who choose not to have non-Muslim friends? Khadijah, Chudnoff, in one sentence.
I feel for you. I am here for the convert sister. My mother and father are both converts. My father was, from a Jewish family. So my grandma had a funeral for him when he converted. So I know the deep, deep loneliness that comes with that. Know that you're seen and we love you. And inshallah, Allah will reward you for your struggle, because Allah promises that when we give up something for the sake of pleasing Him, Allah will give you better. And I pray that that day will come very soon for you, inshallah. I mean,
Ameen. Alisa?
As a convert, still have friends that are non-Muslim, but I would say very, very few, maybe one or two. Of course, my family aren't Muslim, but as a Muslim, I knew it was my responsibility to get to know other Muslims if I wanted to keep my faith strong. So I tried my best to connect with other Muslims and joining MSA, just being friendly and not afraid to reach out to people. That's, alhamdulillah, how I got to meet Khadijah, how I got to meet many other Muslim sisters who have brought me in, my husband's friends, their wives, reach out. Don't be afraid to reach out. Sometimes it's intimidating, but get out there, join those groups.
Khadijah Adebayo, try one sentence. Khadijah Adebayo, are you still there?
Sorry. Oh yeah, sorry. So I would just say, I agree with Alisa. For me, my mom had that problem, but for me, because when I was in the different Sunday schools and I had different friends, and then going out to the MSAs, and then forcing myself to go to the Masjid events, keep going and going and going and going, and then eventually, but I have Muslim and non-Muslim friends. So yeah,
that's good. Okay, so and it's going to be last question, I'm telling you. Are there any suggestions on how to get people to be involved with the Masjid? Try one sentence, Khadijah Chudnoff.
I think she had to get off.
Okay, that's fine. Go ahead. Alisa?
Just send an invite. I brought my grandmother on for Ramadan one time. I was like, hey, we're having a lot of food. You want to come and eat with me? So she came. So bring whoever.
Good. Khatijah?
Yeah, in terms of youth, I remember every time we had fun events, people would want to bring their friends, and their friends would get excited and they would come back again and again. So that's one. But then also in terms of adult life, wait, what was the question? I'll never forget, there was a khutbah and somebody said, what you need to do is, if you see a new person, hi, how are you? How can I help you? Do you want to join us in this event? And sometimes people, don't take the advice. But we had an event, we had a picnic, and somebody said that to somebody new. And so they keep coming back. And then at one masjid, they said, just have fun events. Sorry, that's not in one sentence.
Thank you very much. So as I said, we have many questions we cannot answer because we already 3 minutes over. So Kianaat, do you have anything to say? Otherwise, we can conclude.
Yes, if you guys would like, I'll put my email in the chat, and whoever would like to continue a discussion, send me your email and I'll send you the next part of the event. And then I can also send you another thing for us to get together if everyone wants to have another informal discussion, because there's a lot of things that were unanswered, and I know a lot of people probably have a lot of other questions. So I'll send my email. You guys send that to me.
Jazakallah khair. Hafida, are you still here? Do you want to say something fast? Hafida, are you still here? I don't know. I still see her hands up.
Yes, Salam alaikum. Sorry, I misplaced my phone. Yeah, I like to just summarize, but this is going to be like a long. I just noticed that, it's not because you're married to, or you're converted, or you're married to somebody from different country. That's not the only issue, because we born Muslim and we grow up Muslim and we're married to the same cultural, a husband from the same culture. However, I can project a lot of issues that you guys going through, and we all going, like, somebody is growing up in grew up in a different household with different principles, different manners, and then you come in from completely different household who has different principles and different food or even way of talking or way of dressing, and that can cause an issue as well, something that we have a life to work through. Kids in summer, and for kids, we cannot forget that we have resources here in our community, like the Islamic school that we have, provide a lot of or prevent a lot of long-term conflict about some beliefs or the principles, you know, the horizontal relationship between human and God, and we need to take that in consideration, and also give us a baseline of what is the relationship should be between person to person and between a person to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I think that's it.
Jazakallah khair, Hafida. So with this, I'm going to conclude. In summary, what we learned today about multicultural thing, of course, there's a lot of fun living in different cultures, learning about different cultures. But what really would help us, I'm just going to summarize, is that we need to embrace the differences. We need to educate ourselves. And we have to pay equal attention to both the cultures or whatever cultures we are interacting with. And we have to learn the language to communicate in a better way. And definitely we need to have patience and of course discuss how to make it work. Like pretty much all of our panelists today mentioned that to talk it out, to talk with each other, to feel comfortable and discuss and solve it. And last thing is, of course, learn to be tolerant. So inshallah, look forward to our next virtual tea. That will be, as Kianaat informed me, it will be inshallah on African American month. So keep looking for our flyer for that. So till then, Assalamu alaikum all. Inshallah, have a wonderful evening. Best duas for everybody. Assalamu alaikum.